Coming up on We Talk News this week, Live Free or Die is New Hampshire's state motto. Now, it might be weed for sale at state-run liquor stores. We talk with a member of the New Hampshire House. The Last Prisoner Project has a new cause named Kevin Allen, and you can help with his freedom. Plus, Fresh Toast has 5 ways to enhance your buzz, and wait till you hear what they suggest to do with honey. All that and state reports from coast to coast on We Talk News next. Pro Cannabis Media and PCM TV programming is supported by Revolutionary Clinics in Massachusetts, the #1 medical dispensary where the patient comes first, and by Salient Systems for Video Surveillance. You've got regulations, Salient has solutions for your security needs. And by Accounting Buds, your #1 accounting solution for the cannabis industry. And by TCP's Style Lighting Grow Kit, all you need to grow.
We are Pro Cannabis Media.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to We Talk News. I'm Alaina Pinto reporting for Pro Cannabis Media. This week's top story is from one of the nation's most conservative states, New Hampshire. This week, the House of Representatives passed a bill to allow state-run liquor stores to get into the sale of cannabis. There are still a few hurdles for this to pass, but PCM founder Jimmy Young talked to Tim Egan, one of the New Hampshire representatives who voted for this bill earlier this week.
So there is not an expungent provision, which is troubling. There's not an ability for independent businesses to enter into this. So therefore, a BIPOC community or small business owners could get into the cannabis industry. There's no edible faction and there's no home grow. So it's sort of like saying, hey, I got my driver's license, but you gave me a car with 3 wheels. All right. So I can sort of hobble along.
So what's the next step? What's the next step?
So that actually has 2 steps. This bill then goes to Ways and Means because it is a financial impact bill. So it will go over to that committee. So there's a possibility for amendments to be made when it's in the Finance Committee. And then it would, at the end of our House session, we have crossover day and all the bills that get passed in the House go to the Senate and vice versa. So then there'll be another opportunity for this to be discussed in the Senate and potentially amended. Now, the Senate is a little more strict in terms of approaching the cannabis logic in New Hampshire than the House. Right now, the ballpark is of the 20 some odd senators, we probably have 40 to 50%. We actually need to get it to 60% so that or 70%. So we're closer to a override of a veto, but at least get a majority so it passes. What I've been told by a variety of representatives, is that this cannabis sale in liquor store bill only is the only kind of bill that the governor will sign. So if he is interested in this bill, he will put his own pressure on the Senate, and maybe getting that majority in the Senate to vote for it will be easily done, not just by the efforts of the House caucuses. The Republicans and the Democrats are working very closely together on this. You had on your show my fellow Representative Ross Berry, Daryl Eames from the New Hampshire Can, the industry, Matt Simon, who's part of the medicinal folks. Matt Simon doesn't like this bill at all because it doesn't allow home grow, but he said it is a step in the right direction. Let's try and amend it. And that's what good legislation does, is if it's approached from all sides, you try to find a consensus that gets passed. So the next steps are looking at it in the committee for Ways and Means, and then looking at it when it goes to the Senate. So all intents and purposes, if those things move forward and nothing else changes, and the governor is for this, New Hampshire could see legal adult cannabis approved in as soon as June.
The U.S. Capitol is getting a new cannabis holiday. This week, the mayor of Washington, D.C. signed a law that expands the district's medical marijuana program in a number of ways. It also creates a week-long medical marijuana tax relief holiday that coincides with the ever-important day for consumers. I'm sure you could guess it, 4/20. With more from the nation's capital, let's check in with Vote Pro Podcast's Phil Adams.
Hi, I'm Phil Adams from Vote Pro Podcast, here with the Weed Talk News DC report. A U.S. congressman has suggested that legalizing cannabis will help improve, among other things, mail delivery. Representative Ed Perlmutter of Colorado made the comments at a meeting of the House Rules Committee last week. The Colorado lawmaker who sponsored the Safe Banking Act in the House cited complaints from constituents who say they're not getting their mail on time due to worker shortages. Perlmutter said the federal government could help alleviate the shortages that have plagued the U.S. Postal Service if postal workers didn't have to lose their jobs just for using cannabis. A House committee is holding a hearing this week to discuss the financial struggles small and minority-owned businesses face, particularly in the cannabis industry. Representatives from the Minority Cannabis Business Association are set to testify before the House Financial Services Subcommittee on Consumer Protection and Financial Services, chaired by Ed Perlmutter. The MCBA is expected to discuss the economic barriers federal prohibition has created within the cannabis market, as well as some potential solutions. One such solution likely to be discussed is enactment of the Safe Banking Act to protect financial institutions that serve state legal cannabis businesses. Virginia lawmakers voted this week to expedite retail cannabis sales. The state Senate approved a plan to allow existing medical dispensaries to begin selling cannabis products to the general public as soon as September. This proposal would move up the scheduled 2024 start date by 16 months. The bill now heads to the House of Delegates, where the GOP majority remains divided on the particulars of how to make the legal retail market work. Commenting on the heavy lifting that remains as the legislation makes its way through the committees, Garen Shipley, a spokesman for House Speaker Todd Gilbert, said, quote, "We'll come up with something." That's the Weed Talk News DC report for this week. I'm Phil Adams from Vote Pro Podcast.
The New York adult use cannabis market is ready to challenge other legal states' rollout. This past week, the New York legislature approved a bill that would give the already existing group of hemp farmers in that state the first opportunity to apply for cannabis growing and manufacturing licenses. If you have been growing hemp in New York for at least 2 years, you will be able to apply for a cannabis cultivator and manufacturing license. And there will also be preference for social equity applicants to apply. And now for the rest of the news from the Big Apple and the big cannabis companies. Here's the Green Market Report's Debra Borchardt.
This is the business update for Weed Talk News from the Green Market Report. Ascend Wellness has pulled off the gloves in its latest complaint against MedMen, calling the company broken and mismanaged and saying that it has repeatedly reneged on its promises to its employees, suppliers, shareholders, medical marijuana patients, and regulators. MedMen had agreed to sell its New York assets to Ascend, but the deal was contingent upon New York giving approval. MedMen has since refused to close it, saying that the state didn't give final approval and accused the state and Ascend of influence peddling. Ascend went on to say in this week's complaint that MedMen had buyer's remorse and they just want more money. The complaint also calls MedMen a pariah in the cannabis industry. More big SPAC news this week. Cannabis blank check company Relativity Acquisition has raised $125 million. Relativity Acquisition's common stock is set to trade on the NASDAQ, the people behind me, using the symbol RACY or RACY. And cannabis banking company Safe Harbor Financial will go public this week through the SPAC Northern Light Acquisition Corp. Safe Harbor is a subsidiary of Partner Colorado Credit Union, and that is a Colorado chartered credit union. I'm Debra Borchardt, and this has been your business update from the Green Market Report in Times Square in New York, right in front of the NASDAQ.
The Massachusetts Cannabis Control Commission may have some work ahead of them. Last week, a bill to expand on current cannabis regulations passed committee with no problems. And if the bill becomes a law, it would allow medical and recreational businesses the option for on-site consumption. But that would come along with a renegotiation of permits for many businesses. Ron Marshalsea has the rest of this week's Massachusetts report.
I'm Ron Marshalsea with the Massachusetts Cannabis Report for Weed Talk News. The State Cannabis Control Commission is evaluating which Massachusetts cities and towns were hit hardest by the war on drugs, and which residents by law should be eligible to receive the benefits of the now legal $2.5 billion industry. A quote from a Boston Globe piece written by Massachusetts Cannabis Commissioner Ava Calendar Concepcion states, "The complexities of the war on drugs evoke discomfort and pain, particularly among those coping with its collateral consequences. However, to ensure justice in the booming Massachusetts cannabis industry, it is critical that those who should benefit participate in this process." She ends her piece saying how the Commission can and must do better with a more comprehensive and inclusive approach. Lantern is now expanding its cannabis delivery services to the South Shore. Lantern is an on-demand cannabis e-commerce marketplace and home delivery platform. And now that Lantern has partnered with South Shore Buds, customers over the age of 21 living in South Boston, Dorchester, Quincy, Brockton, Marshfield, Abington, Rockland, Kingston, and Plymouth are now able to order delivery of their favorite cannabis products through the Lantern marketplace. And finally, Cambridge is officially getting its first adult use dispensary. The state's Cannabis Control Commission approved a retailer license for Yamba Market, a black-owned retailer based at 580 Massachusetts Avenue. The company, which is the first adult use dispensary to get final licensure in Cambridge, plans to open in the next few days. The 5,800 square foot shop will include a dispensary area and a 750 square foot community space that the business will set up as a public gallery. That's this week's Massachusetts Cannabis Report. For Weed Talk News, I'm Ron Marshallsea.
Bay State Cannabis Report is supported by Holyoke Cannabis, Holyoke's finest cannabis recreational experience.
The state of Pennsylvania may be leaning toward adult use cannabis sales and consumption. Last week was the first time the state Senate Law and Justice Committee heard a proposal about the potential future of the market. And while formal legislation hasn't been introduced yet, an official memo seems to outline that a large portion of cannabis taxes from retail sales would be directed to the state police. With more from Pennsylvania this week, here's Claudia Post.
I'm Claudia Post from Scarlet Express, and I'm here in the Keystone State, Pennsylvania, reporting for Weed Talk News. First up, the first adult use cannabis legislation meeting was held last week and personally supervised by Senator Mike Reagan, who also chose all of the witnesses to present. I think Senator Reagan is a little misguided because he wants a large portion of the taxes collected from the rec market to go to the state police. I don't know how that's going to fly with the public at large, but some of it can. Of course, nobody's asking me. Next, Reagan also suggested that anyone who sold any amount of cannabis in Pennsylvania today is responsible for violence, mayhem, and murder. Also, the optics on that are not so great. Okay, too bad he also did not discuss transitioning legacy folks into the sunshine, as I like to call it, as other states have done. I think that's wrong as well. They deserve a shot. And I hope that all future hearings will allow for a more diverse set of voices so that we can help to change the opinion of our Senate. Next up, Tilt Holdings has partnered with Toast, an Aspen, Colorado born cannabis brand. Now, Tilt will be launching Toast in Pennsylvania and Ohio. They are currently in the process of rolling out in Massachusetts. This is a very nice report. The new chief executive of Parallel, with a location in Pittsburgh, published an open letter apologizing for the way the company has handled equity issues in the past. And they are committed to work to eliminate protectionist policies that lead to inquiries and injustices. Parallel is partnering with the Minority Cannabis Business Association to help advocate for the fundamental changes as he suggests in his open letter. That's a wrap for Pennsylvania. I'm Claudia Post from Scarlet Express, and I'll be back next week to talk about what's hot and what's not in Pennsylvania. From Weed Talk News, have a fabulous week.
A love letter from Vermont to cannabis businesses. On Valentine's Day, the state's Cannabis Control Board announced that prospective adult use market operators will soon have the chance to apply for pre-approval licensing, even as the board continues ironing out regulations that will govern that market. Here's Jessie Lynn Dolan with more from Vermont this week.
I'm Jessie Lynn Dolan from Nurse Grown Organics and Vermont Cannabis Nurses, and this is the Weed Talk News Vermont Report. Vermont Cannabis Control Board announced that they are opening their license pre-qualification window for applicants on Wednesday, March 16th. The Cannabis Control Board's Rules 1 and 2 are currently in the Legislative Committee on Administrative Rules, with a hearing scheduled for February 24th. Rules 3 and 4's comment period has ended and commenced with a public hearing on Friday, February 18th, to address all comments received. The Vermont State Employees Credit Union, who plans to work with Vermont cannabis businesses, has a moratorium on opening new cannabis and hemp accounts until the Cannabis Control Board's final rules are in place. Currently in the Committee on Government Operations and being taken up next week, Bill H-548, an act relating to miscellaneous cannabis establishment procedures, would do a variety of things, including exempting solid concentrates, oils, and tinctures from the 50 milligram THC limit per package, decouple employee cannabis identification cards from a specific place of employment so folks can work for any licensee, and permit an applicant to hold more than one testing laboratory license. Bill S-188, an act relating to licensed small cannabis cultivators as farming, was discussed in the Senate this week. This bill would help small growers by exempting them from zoning and allow licensed cultivators to purchase and sell seeds and immature plants to one another, and license wholesalers to sell seeds and plants to licensed cultivators. In anticipation of the adult use market, longtime Brattleboro CBD store Vermont Hempicurian moved locations to a large renovated barn, now called the Vermont Grow Barn. On February 16th, herbalist Emma Merritt from Crea Botanicals Hemp Extraction and Formulation Services held a webinar on the intersection between CBD and herbal apothecary. On February 19th, Southern Vermont Cannabis Culture is hosting an event at the Bellows Falls Moose Lodge called Things You Might Want to Know: Education, Networking, and Music. They'll have guest speakers, Vermont Normal, Vermontawana, and My Kind of Jamaica, food, and live music by the Equalities. Hetty Vermont has announced the next round of the Hetties, Vermont's Growers Cup. The award ceremony will be held April 16th at the Barns at Lang Farm in Essex. That's the Vermont Report for Weed Talk News. I'm Vermont's cannabis nurse, Jessie Lynn Dolan.
South Carolina is one step closer to medical marijuana. Last week, a bill to legalize cannabis for medical use officially passed in the Senate. It now goes to the House of Representatives for consideration. And sticking with the South, here's Heather Allman with this week's Florida Report.
I'm Heather Allman from Cannabis Law Report with This Week in Florida for Weed Talk News. Last week, the Secretary of the USDA announced that they are investing $1.4 billion into several states, including Florida, in order to help create wealth in rural communities. Florida universities are receiving some of the USDA funds, and other grants and loans will assist Florida with everything from job training to expansion of family farms to providing capital for new business owners. However, since the Department of Agriculture and the Department of Health work together with the Office of Medical Marijuana Use in Florida, it is unclear whether these USDA grants can help the growing number of struggling cannabis and hemp businesses throughout the state. On Friday night, the scent of marijuana wafted through the air of the Swamp City Gallery Lounge in Miami as it hosted its first medical marijuana event in 2 years. In collaboration with the North Florida chapter of Weed for Warriors, nearly 100 veterans shared camaraderie in the outdoor consumption lounge, consisting of a backyard space surrounded by high privacy fence. Founded in 2016, the Swamp City venue was started with the goal of using art, music, craft, beer, and wine to promote further discussion of cannabinoids. Booths included local vendors selling CBD, as well as vertically integrated cannabis dispensaries from Florida. In other news, the Flagler County Sheriff's Office Special Investigations Unit seized 42 pounds of marijuana, over $23,000 in cash, and other drug paraphernalia in a recent Palm Coast bust. Detectives arrested the 30-year-old suspect after SWAT team members executed a search warrant and seized THC edibles, oil, and drug paraphernalia, including a cash counter and a transaction ledger. Sheriff Rick Staley says that, quote, illegal narcotics are illegal. Busting drug dealers and putting them out of business will be a priority for us, end quote. The suspect faces charges of trafficking over 25 pounds of cannabis, possession of a Schedule I substance, and possession of drug paraphernalia. In addition, the investigation is ongoing and further charges are pending. That's a wrap for Florida Cannabis this week. I'm Heather Allman from Cannabis Law Report for Weed Talk News.
There's been some pushback in California over proposed cannabis tax cuts. Though farmers have had some success in getting regulators to slash taxes for companies, now advocates of low-income youth are saying they need that money. Service providers for those youth say they oppose any cuts because their programs rely heavily on money collected from Prop 64. So could this have any impact on Governor Newsom's openness to cutting costs for companies? Well, Christopher Smith has more in this week's California Report.
Greetings from the left coast. Ho-hum, another Super Bowl, another trophy for Los Angeles. And if you're from Cincinnati, I hope you've packed your own Super Bowl for this week's California Roundup for Weed Talk News. Speaking of Super Bowls, let's talk chips and dips, specifically guacamole. Did you hear the one about the Mexican drug cartel that threatened an American avocado inspector? 2 days before the Super Bowl, the biggest avocado day of the year, by the way, the United States shut down avocado imports to the U.S. until the Mexican government can guarantee the safety of our inspectors. Are avocados the big game in Mexico? You bet. The green gold is worth $2.4 billion annually. Most avocados are grown in the western state of Michoacan, where warring drug cartels are scrambling for new revenues because legalization is working. End prohibition and end organized crime stranglehold on cannabis, people. It's working here in the U.S. and it will work in Mexico if given the chance. Last year, cartels sacked the lime industry in Mexico, causing lime prices here in the U.S. to spike 90%. I think I'm out of football puns, but even though the drug cartels have messed with our margaritas and now our guacamole, did I mention that LA won the Super Bowl anyway? Now, some thought it was big news that Snoop Dogg caught a blunt before his performance at halftime, but halftime is not as impressive as this fact. It was the first time in history that the Super Bowl was held in a cannabis legal city. The nearest dispensary to Lo-Fi Stadium is only 2 miles away, and whether it was a pre-roll, Super Bowl, hip-hop, or rock and roll, the cannabis industry was the big winner on Sunday. And San Diego has joined Humboldt County in voting to reduce cannabis taxes. Specifically, San Diego City Council voted to lower taxes on cannabis producers from 8% to 2%. The move is intended to attract more cannabis businesses to the city, which is amazing because almost 70% of the municipalities in California have opted out of having cannabis businesses. The ones that have allowed are making tax revenues, jobs, real estate, innovations, medicine, and Super Bowl trophies. Did I mention that we just won the Super Bowl here in LA? I'm Christopher Smith, publisher of the American Cannabis Report, sharing California's super weed, super music, super Snoop, and Super Bowl trophies for Weed Talk News.
A cannabis reform bill in Washington state has failed to clear in the House. It was among a series of legislation this session aimed at increasing social equity and racial diversity in the industry, with sweeping changes to the issuing of cannabis licenses to promoting business ownership among people of color. Josh Kincaid has more from Washington State this week.
I'm Josh Kincaid from the Talking Hedge with the Washington State Cannabis Report for Weed Talk News. Washington pot shops call on the state to improve protection from violent robberies with a bill designed to lengthen the sentences for these pot shop robbers. Advocates told lawmakers that the swift uptake in robberies has put the industry in a crisis. Until federal legalization or the Safe Banking Act passes, cannabis will remain a cash-only business drawing added risks for local small business owners. There's been dozens of cannabis shop robberies in the last few months in Western Washington alone. Some cannabis shop owners feel that the state's not doing enough to protect their businesses. And since law enforcement agencies handle these robberies, the Liquor and Cannabis Board said that it's not always notified when a crime happens. But rest easy, because the State Liquor and Cannabis Board said that it's communicating safety tips with cannabis retailers, including advice to hire armed security guards, make frequent cash deposits, post signs that staff don't have access to cash, or communicate safety guidelines with staff so that they know what to do in the event of a robbery. My 2 cents is that the violent robbers should be in prison, but if you're going to pass a bill, how about you lobby the state capitol for a better banking law so that you can actually protect these businesses? Okay, next week, you guys are going to find about the Washington State plan for social equity licenses. But with that, we're going to have to roll up this Washington State Cannabis Report. I'm Josh Kincaid from the Talking Hedge reporting for Weed Talk News. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, or don't, and I'm out.
Mike Tyson takes on Michigan with cannabis. The legendary boxer is launching his cannabis line, Tyson 2.0, in the state this year. It'll be available through an exclusive cultivation partnership with the state's largest cannabis operator, Common Citizen. And with that, let's check in with Michigan Normal Executive Director, Rick Thompson.
Hello again, everyone. This is the Michigan Report with Rick Thompson on Weed Talk News. Let's begin. Out with the M and in with the C. Michigan's marijuana regulatory agency is being renamed the Cannabis Regulatory Agency, and the name change comes with expanded responsibilities for administering the hemp industry in our state. The changes are the result of a new executive order from Governor Gretchen Whitmer dated February 13. Hemp used to be under the administrative authority of the Department of Agriculture and Rural Development. All changes will become active 60 days from the issuance of the executive order. By aggregating the responsibilities for all things related to the cannabis plant under one roof, Michigan has cleared the way for a melding of the hemp and cannabis industries in a way which other states are not yet experiencing. And speaking of the melding of hemp and cannabis industries, both industries were shocked to learn that the renamed CRA is willing to allow Michigan cannabis processors to import hemp from other states to be processed into THC for use in the medical and adult use cannabis industries. A hearing was held Wednesday at the agency offices. Michigan cannabis cultivators are concerned that an influx of cheaply grown out-of-state hemp could destroy their businesses. Hemp producers in the state are worried that new regulations might make them conform to the regulatory program outdoor cultivators of high THC cannabis plants have to comply with. And police from all agencies are worried that they won't be able to tell the difference between a truck full of hemp coming in from Kentucky and a trunk full of cannabis coming from Flint. Processors are loving the new regs because it might generate a ton of work for them. There's concern for the success of those who invested millions of dollars to launch outdoor cannabis gardens, which might be made obsolete by the influx of cheap THC oil made from out-of-state hemp crops. And nobody seems happy that the product of that hemp processing must be labeled as synthetic THC. Now, the new imported hemp industry is likely to be hampered by the proposed regulations themselves, including the off-putting labels, the tiny amount of THC allowed in the products they can produce, and an uncertain testing scheme, as well as a tightening of regulations for all hemp producers in Michigan. The bottom line here is this is an industry expansion which doesn't seem to favor anyone, as the consumers won't be purchasing those ultra low THC products. Hemp cultivators in Michigan are scared. Licensed cultivators of high THC cannabis are unhappy at this new threat, and government agencies don't know how to respond. Now, there's no word yet from the regulatory agency on any adjustments to the proposed program originating from the public hearing and comment period. 2 cannabis companies have partnered with the Higher Learning Institute to offer scholarships to social equity applicants in Michigan's adult use cannabis program. The Cannabis Community Social Equity Scholarship would affect 20 people or more, and the institute is located in Pontiac. Scholarship recipients experience an accelerated program of education on business affairs and the basics of the industry, including cultivation, extraction, cannabis consultation, also known as bud tending. Program graduates are better able to establish and maintain the cannabis business in Michigan's harsh and ever-changing market environment. Now, Michael Thompson was freed from prison here in Michigan a little over a year ago, but his impact has been much larger than many would have imagined. A film about his experience called The Sentence of Michael Thompson has won a Clio Award and is set to premiere March 9 at the Santa Barbara International Film Festival, and it will be featured at the South by Southwest Festival on March 13 through 17. The piece is called a documentary short film. Now, Michael Thompson holds the record as Michigan's longest serving nonviolent offender, and his sentence was based on cannabis crimes. I will be with Michael Thompson during his very first viewing of the film, happening this evening at his home here in Flint, Michigan. And that's it for the Michigan Report with Rick Thompson on Weed Talk News.
The Last Prisoner Project works on getting all convicted cannabis felons out of jail as soon as possible. And one person in Louisiana may be on his way to freedom. 39-year-old Kevin Allen was sentenced to life in prison because he was a habitual offender after getting busted for a $20 weed deal. And now, with the new Louisiana law in place for righting the injustices of the past, Allen might be granted his freedom. The district attorney in that county, Skylar Marvin, can now reach plea agreements with wrongly convicted felons who were not given a fair trial. The Last Prisoner Project wants to push for Kevin Allen's release, and to help, you can talk about it online and use the hashtag #FreeKevinAllen or contact the DA by phone in Louisiana. And finally, the Fresh Toast website has come up with 5 ways to improve your consumption and use of cannabis. Hard to believe, but one has to do with mints. Supposedly, they can curb your munchies. We'll try it later. A penny in a pill box full of buds can help smooth out your product. And if you add honey to the outside of a rolled joint, it delivers a sweet and smooth draw. That sounds fun. The 5th thing they suggest using is a CD or a floppy disk to pack your bowls, but good luck finding one of those floppy disks. And also, I feel like your thumb is probably just fine. But it really is a whole new world of weed out there, so use it responsibly. For Weed Talk News, I'm Alaina Pinto.
Weed Talk and In the Weeds are 2 productions of Pro Cannabis Media supported by Revolutionary Clinics, one of the top medical cannabis dispensaries in the Massachusetts area, now with 3 locations in Greater Boston, 2 in Cambridge and 1 on Broadway in Somerville. Rev Clinics has a patient-first mission. They will customize your needs as a medical patient with the proper titration and combination of strains, flavors, and products. Rev Clinics, where the patient comes first.
Difference is building a solution for that individual, not just a custom, here's a box, here's a video, here's how you make your VMS. We custom design and custom build every situation for exactly what the customer needs. And we keep the costs low. We have multiple tiers, as far as what you're looking at on the cost side of things. If you want a one-time, where you just pay one initial cost, we have that. If you want to maintain your system and have the highest protection and highest capabilities and highest upgrades at all times, we have different plans for you. But we scale it so it's scalable and affordable 100%.
Pro Cannabis Media programming is available live and on demand on our Facebook page at Pro Canna Media, on Instagram at Pro Cannabis Media, on LinkedIn also at Pro Cannabis Media, on YouTube and YouTube Live on Pro Cannabis Media, Twitter at Pro Canna Media, and on twitch.tv/Pro Cannabis Media. So like, share, and subscribe to all of our content, newsletters, and shows live or on demand.
We are Pro Cannabis Media.